A quiet jog turns into a nightmare when Monica Johnson, a seasoned FBI agent, is stopped by a cop for one reason only: her skin color. What should have been a peaceful evening quickly turns into a test of resilience and injustice. Monica Johnson never imagined that a simple evening jog would turn into something far more sinister. Silver Heights, a place of manicured lawns and towering mansions, was supposed to be her sanctuary, her escape. Clad in her gym clothes, she looked like any other middle-aged woman enjoying the fresh air, yet few knew the truth. She wasn't just a jogger, she was a veteran FBI agent who had faced dangers far greater than the quiet streets of this neighborhood. The air was crisp, the gentle evening breeze brushing past as Monica ran, feeling the weight of the week lift off her shoulders. But peace is fragile, and safety is an illusion. Just as she passed a dimly lit corner, the sudden wail of a police siren shattered the calm. A patrol car came to a halt, and stepping out was a white officer, his gaze locked onto her. The moment hung heavy in the air. Monica didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. Monica barely had time to process the situation before the officer began closing in, his sharp gaze cutting through the evening air like a blade. His frown was deep, his posture rigid, as if she had just committed a crime. "Hello," he said, his voice laced with cold suspicion. "What are you doing here at this hour?" Monica, though taken aback, refused to let the irritation show on her face. She had been through these uncomfortable racial encounters before, always frustrating, always exhausting, but never any less infuriating. Keeping her composure, she replied evenly, "I'm just jogging, officer." But he didn't stop. He kept moving toward her, his eyes sweeping over her like she was out of place, like she didn't belong. "Jogging? Here?" he pressed, his skepticism thick. "You live around here? Never seen you before." Monica inhaled deeply, forcing herself to remain calm. "Yes, I just moved in. My house is on Maple Street, just around the corner." His arms crossed over his chest, his expression hardening. "Maple Street," he echoed. "Which house? Can you prove it?" Her patience wore thin. She knew she didn't have to prove anything. This was her neighborhood, her home, but experience had taught her that men like him thrived on pushing boundaries. And worse, abusing power. "I don't carry house papers when I go jogging," she said smoothly. "But I can assure you, I live here." The officer let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. "You know, this neighborhood isn't a place where just anyone can walk around," he sneered. "We keep it safe from strangers. If you really live here, maybe you should prove it." A chill ran down Monica's spine. Something about him was off, not just the arrogance in his voice but the unspoken message behind his words. His gaze, his tone, his posture, all of it reeked of contempt. Stealthily, Monica brushed her fingers over the small device clipped to her workout gear. A hidden camera. A precaution she carried from years of working dangerous cases. A single touch, and it began recording. "Officer," she said, her voice measured but firm, "I don't think jogging in my own neighborhood is something that requires proof." His frown deepened, his voice rising. "Are you trying to get serious with me?" he snapped. "I'm in charge of security in this area. If you want to live here peacefully, you'd better cooperate. Otherwise, I can't guarantee there won't be trouble." Monica's jaw tightened. The veiled threat ignited a slow burn of anger inside her, but she knew better than to let it show. Instead, she kept her voice steady. "I thought it was your job to ensure the safety of all residents here, not threaten them." Blake's expression darkened. "Don't tell me what to do," he growled. "Do you even know how long I've been working here? People like you." He stopped himself, but Monica knew exactly what he meant. "If you don't want trouble, you should listen to me." Monica clenched her fists at her sides. She had encountered countless abusers of power in her career, but each time, it still stung. Still tested her restraint. The wrong response could turn this into something far more dangerous. "You are overstepping your authority," she warned, her voice unwavering. "I suggest you stop this before it goes any further." Blake let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "I am the one who decides what is too far, not you." Monica didn't respond, only held his gaze, steady, unreadable. The camera was rolling. The truth would be recorded. But deep down, she knew this encounter wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Power corrupts. But when it meets resistance, it turns dangerous. Monica's expression remained unreadable, though her mind worked quickly. Blake's meaning was clear. He wasn't just abusing his authority. He was demanding payment for so-called protection. A bribe. The audacity of it almost made her laugh, but beneath that, a fire of indignation burned. This wasn't just about her. This was about a system she had spent years fighting against. "Are you asking for money to protect residents?" Monica asked, her tone controlled but sharp with intent. "Because that doesn't sound like the duty of a police officer." Blake sneered. "Don't play innocent. I know people like you. Newcomers. If you don't want trouble, you'd better cooperate." Monica's fists clenched at her sides. Every fiber of her being urged her to snap back, but she held firm. "You're abusing your authority, Blake," she said, keeping her voice steady despite the heat rising in her chest. "This isn't just wrong, it's illegal. I'd advise you to think very carefully before going any further." Her warning only fueled his anger. Blake stepped closer, his face twisted with contempt. "Who do you think you are?" he snarled. "You don't get to talk to me like that. People like you don't understand the rules here." Monica met his glare, unwavering. "I understand the law very well. Probably better than you." Blake's face darkened. "Shut up. You don't know who you're messing with." The moment was turning. Monica could feel it in the air, a shift from tension to impending violence. She had been in situations like this before, and she knew exactly what to do. She remained still, her every movement calculated, aware that her hidden camera was capturing everything. Blake's voice dropped into something low and threatening. "I told you if you don't want trouble, you'll shut up and do what I say. Otherwise, I'll make sure you regret ever stepping foot in this neighborhood." Monica stood her ground, her voice unwavering. "And if you don't stop right now, you could lose your job. What you're doing isn't just an abuse of power, it's racially motivated harassment." That was it. That was the trigger. Blake's face twisted in rage. He stepped back, then, in a single motion, yanked his gun from his holster and aimed it directly at her. "I'm tired of hearing your nonsense," he spat. "You want to live? Then shut up and do what I say." Any other person might have panicked. But Monica... Decades of training kept her pulse steady. Slowly, she raised her hands, not in surrender, but in control. Her voice was calm, cold, deadly. "You just made a big mistake, Officer Blake. Put your gun down before you ruin your entire career." Blake let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Career?" he mocked. "You don't get it. This is my world. You're just an outsider. And I'm not afraid of anyone." Monica's gaze didn't waver. But deep down, she knew, this was far from over. Power shifts in an instant. And when it does, fear replaces arrogance. Monica held Blake's gaze, her expression unreadable. Then, with quiet precision, she spoke. "Let me tell you exactly who you're dealing with," she said, her voice sharp as steel. "I'm Monica Johnson, Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation. And everything you say and do has been recorded." Blake froze. The color drained from his face, his hands suddenly unsteady on the gun. Monica reached into her pocket and retrieved her FBI badge, holding it up so there was no mistaking the truth. "You crossed the line, Officer Blake," she continued, her tone unwavering. "And you will be held accountable for your actions." Blake stammered, his fingers twitching over the weapon. I don't know I didn't." "Don't know what?" Monica cut in, stepping forward. "Don't believe I'm an FBI agent? Or don't believe that your actions will be exposed?" Blake's breath came in short, panicked bursts. His world was unraveling, and he knew it. "Put down your gun," Monica ordered, her voice a quiet command. "Before you commit an irreparable crime." Blake hesitated for a second longer, then, with shaking hands, he holstered his weapon. I'm sorry, he stuttered. I didn't know, I just... Monica wasn't interested in excuses. She reached for her phone, her fingers moving swiftly as she dialed. When the police chief picked up, she spoke in a clipped, professional tone. "This is Special Agent Monica Johnson," she said. "I need officers sent to my location immediately. One of your men, Officer Blake Carter, abused his authority, threatened me with a firearm, and made racially motivated remarks. I have the entire incident recorded. I will be submitting it as evidence." As she ended the call, Blake stood there, drenched in sweat, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. His wide, desperate eyes met hers, pleading, but Monica remained unmoved. "Sit down and wait," she instructed. "You'll have a chance to explain everything in court." Blake swallowed hard and obeyed, lowering himself onto the sidewalk like a man who had just lost everything. Monica kept a safe distance, but never let her guard down. She had seen men like Blake before, bullies who reveled in power until it was stripped away. And though she knew this wasn't the end, she had control now. More importantly, she knew justice was on its way. Minutes later, flashing red and blue lights sliced through the darkening sky. A patrol car rolled to a stop, its presence a stark contrast to the quiet suburban street. Blake remained seated, his head bowed, no longer the aggressive, sneering officer he had been just moments before. Two officers stepped out, one man, one woman. Their eyes flicked between Monica and Blake, confusion evident in their expressions. "What's going on here?" the male officer asked cautiously. Monica took a step forward, her badge glinting under the streetlights. "I am Special Agent Monica Johnson with the Federal Bureau of Investigation," she announced firmly. "This officer, Blake Carter, abused his authority, harassed me, and threatened me at gunpoint while I was out jogging. I have video evidence of the entire incident." The two officers exchanged a look, and in that moment, Monica knew Blake's reign of unchecked power was over. Power corrupts, but when justice arrives, it does so with undeniable force. The two officers exchanged uncertain glances before the female officer took charge. "We'll handle this, Agent Johnson. Perhaps you should wait in the patrol car while we question him." Monica shook her head, her gaze locked onto Blake. "No. I'll stay right here. I want to ensure this is documented and handled properly." Blake lifted his head, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. His voice, though shaken, still carried defiance. "This is my territory. You don't know who she is. She's making it all up." Monica didn't flinch. Her voice was steady, sharp. "You should confess, Blake. Everything is recorded, and you know it." The female officer stepped forward, her voice firm. "Stand up, Blake. You are under arrest. If you have anything to say, save it for your attorney." For a moment, Blake hesitated. His eyes darted around as if looking for an escape, but there was none. Slowly, he rose to his feet, his hands trembling as the cuffs locked around his wrists. As they led him to the patrol car, Monica caught a flicker of something in his eyes. Not just anger, but fear. And yet, she felt no pity. Justice was finally catching up. The evidence that couldn't be ignored. After Blake was taken away, Monica found herself face to face with David Harper, the local police chief. A middle-aged man with a hard, weathered expression, Harper exuded authority. But in his eyes, Monica saw tension, perhaps even unease. "Agent Johnson," he began, his voice measured, "I've been briefed on the situation. Can you show me the evidence?" Without a word, Monica reached for the hidden camera clipped to her clothing and connected it to a playback device. As the footage rolled, Harper watched in silence. Every word, every threat, every moment leading up to Blake drawing his weapon. Harper's jaw tightened. His fingers curled into fists as the damning evidence played out before him. When the recording reached the part where Blake demanded money for protection, the chief let out a long, heavy sigh. "This is unacceptable," he muttered, shaking his head. "Abuse of power is one thing, but outright intimidation and racial profiling? This is a serious violation of the law." Monica's expression was unyielding. "I want to make sure he faces a thorough investigation." This isn't just about me. People like Blake tarnish the entire justice system. Harper nodded, his expression dark. I agree. I'll send this video directly to the prosecutor's office. He'll face charges, to the fullest extent of the law. The fallout. By morning, the story had spread like wildfire. Monica's decision to release the footage to the public ignited a storm of outrage. News headlines across the country carried variations of the same explosive story. FBI agent targeted by racist cop in her own neighborhood, and she fought back. Social media erupted. The video went viral, sparking a wave of protests and demands for police accountability. Monica's face appeared on news broadcasts, her words resonating with thousands. I'm not just standing up for myself, I'm standing up for everyone who has suffered injustice. It's time for change. Within days, the pressure mounted. Community members, many of whom had once ignored the racism in their own backyard, began sending letters of apology. Some admitted they had been blind to the discrimination happening around them. Others vowed to take action. But the biggest impact came in the courtroom. 1 week later, Blake Carter stood before a judge, facing an avalanche of charges: abuse of power, harassment, intimidation, and threatening with a deadly weapon. Justice, at last, was in motion. Part of the problem, she said, her eyes filling with tears. Under public pressure, the local police department conducted a major internal investigation. It uncovered numerous violations of conduct, revealing a long history of abuse that had been overlooked. Several of Blake's colleagues were suspended or dismissed for either covering up misconduct or being complicit in similar acts. The department was forced to implement immediate reforms, including stricter oversight and mandatory racial bias training for all officers. Thanks to Monica's efforts and the influence of her organization, Justice Without Borders, a new bill was introduced in the state legislature. The bill mandated that all police officers wear body cameras at all times while on duty, ensuring transparency and accountability in law enforcement. Monica became one of the leading advocates for the bill, standing before lawmakers and delivering a powerful speech. Justice cannot be just a concept on paper. It needs to be enforced. And those who enforce it must be held accountable to ensure they serve and protect, not intimidate and oppress, she stated firmly before the legislative committee. Her words resonated deeply, and the bill passed with overwhelming support. It became a landmark step toward improving police accountability in her state, inspiring other regions to consider similar policies. Despite Monica's success in making a significant impact, the journey was not without its struggles. She often found herself exhausted, questioning whether she was truly making a difference. The weight of fighting injustice was heavy, but every time she doubted, she would receive letters, emails, and messages from people who had been inspired by her story. One night, after returning home from a long day of advocacy work, Monica found a letter waiting for her. It was from a 12-year-old girl named Chloe, who lived in a small town. Dear Monica, the letter began. I used to feel powerless. I get bullied at school because of the color of my skin, and I was always too scared to stand up for myself. But after hearing your story, I realized that I don't have to stay silent. You are my hero, and I want to be brave like you. Thank you for showing me that one person can make a difference. Tears welled up in Monica's eyes as she finished reading. Chloe's words reminded her why she fought so hard, for the people who felt voiceless, for the ones who needed hope, and for the belief that change was possible. 3 years after the Blake Carter case, Monica was invited to speak at a national conference on criminal justice reform. Standing before an audience of hundreds, she shared her journey and the lessons she had learned. As she reached the end of her speech, she left them with these words. Justice does not happen on its own. We must fight for it. We must be brave, even when we stand alone. But remember this, when you choose to stand up, you are never truly alone. Every step we take creates new paths for others to follow. As the crowd rose in a standing ovation, Monica stood there, feeling the overwhelming power of unity and hope. She knew the road ahead would not be easy, but she also knew she was on the right path. With every speech, every law passed, and every person inspired, she was helping shape a world where justice was not just an ideal, but a reality for everyone. That was the perfect ending to Monica's journey, a powerful testament to resilience, justice, and change. If you're looking for a follow-up, here are some ideas. The Legacy of Justice Without Borders. A time jump to 5 or 10 years later, showing how Monica's organization has grown and the real impact it has made nationwide. Monica's Next Battle. A new case brings Monica back into action, testing her beliefs and putting her in the middle of